Football at 4, John McMullen. You can follow him on Twitter at JFMcMullen. Get your daily football fix here. The Eagles' schedule released. Now you can find out where you're going and when you're going. There will be a road trip of 3 straight games on the road in the month of October. You will see very little of the Eagles in Philadelphia. But in the month of November, they will be back for 3 straight games. And it's a stretch of 3 games against 3 playoff teams. And, John, on this schedule, they only play 4 teams that went to the playoffs a year ago. That we knew. Now we know where. And I know you have them at 10-6.
No, come on, Mike. 16-0. I don't think there's any question. I agree with you, though. At least on paper, it does shape up to be a pretty easy schedule. And I would be really, really disappointed if this team wasn't in the 11-12 win category. I would always say about Peyton Manning, the brilliance of Peyton Manning is that every season in Indianapolis and really throughout Denver, you kind of started at 10 wins as a bad season, and then if you got to 13 or so, it's a really good season. Just the consistency of him as a starting quarterback. This Eagles team, there is no reason they shouldn't be at double digits, and it's just a matter of how far they can go from there. Can they get to that 12, 13 win mark?
Yeah, I know, we go down this schedule here. You start off with a division game. You're at Atlanta, so it's like home, away, home, away. The Jets are in there. That game at Green Bay, of course, they did not make the playoffs last year. You would anticipate that they're going to be better this year. Aaron Rodgers was not healthy, but you're playing, to start a division game, and then Matt Ryan, Matthew Stafford, and Aaron Rodgers back to back there. So you're going to face some good quarterbacks of 3 teams that did make the playoffs. We know that oddity last year that the highest paid quarterbacks did not make the playoffs.
Yeah, and you're going to face good quarterbacks in this league. I mean, that's going to come at some point on the schedule, but I think far too many people boil it down to quarterbacks. And as you just mentioned, if you don't have the other things put together, no one's going to dispute that people like Aaron Rodgers and Matt Ryan are top-tier quarterbacks, but they didn't make the playoffs. And it takes more to win than just having a really good quarterback. And typically, if you're playing Green Bay, you might have a little more angst than typically than you're going to have this year, because not only are they coming off a bad season, not only are they trying to rebuild a number of parts on that roster, but they also have a first-year coach who's not proven. And so marquee quarterback doesn't necessarily mean marquee team, even though everyone kind of boils it down to that.
Yeah, and we also know that after that they'll play Sam Darnold and the Jets. That's the only game in October that they'll be in Philadelphia, because after that, 3 straight road games, John, against some tough teams, Minnesota, Dallas, and Buffalo, not the toughest. 2 teams that didn't make the playoffs. Dallas made the playoffs, but you got 3 straight road games in October, and then 3 straight home games with a bye week jumped in there. So you got the 3 road, but you got the 3 home and a bye week there.
Yeah, I think the best part of this schedule, to be honest, is the travel part of it. If you look at what this team has to do as far as traveling, well, you look later in the season, after Miami, they don't have to get on a plane the rest of the season.
Right, that's December 1st in Miami. Yeah,
and then if you look before the Miami game, as you mentioned, you have all those home games, and really you got to go back to Buffalo. I mean, which isn't the worst trip in the world. So to me, that's the most positive part of it, is that the actual logistics are not going to be difficult at all. And that's something people don't take into account.
Well,
it can be difficult.
Yeah, John, I mean, the last couple of years, they've had at Seattle, at the Rams, at the Chargers. They've been having those NFC West teams. They had San Francisco. They had to make those long cross-country trips. None of that this year. You've got at Green Bay, at Minnesota, at Dallas. That's as far as you're going across the country, and they are all out by Halloween.
Yeah, and to me, that's tremendously helpful. And the fact that, late in the season, you're getting on buses, you're getting on trains, and that's it. So I think from that standpoint, and then the second part is, and this is not just the Eagles, but if you're in a particular division that has some struggling teams, and the NFC East has two, it should be a two-horse race, and two bad teams, at least, unless something sort of catches lightning with the New York Giants or Washington Redskins, that's very helpful as well. So everything as lined up on paper for the Eagles to have a very, very good season, including the fact that they have a top 5 roster in this league. Now, a lot of things can derail that, we know, with injuries and off-the-field issues. There's always, Bill Parcells had that famous quote that 2 or 3 things happen every day in this league that you don't want to happen if you're a head coach. And if you can't handle that, you should get out of the business. So there are always unforeseen circumstances. But, man, this is shaping up well for the Eagles. You can't ask for much more.
No, and we don't know how good these teams are going to be or how bad they're going to be or where, but you can kind of look at the travel, which is big in the NFL. The 3 road games is interesting, but then it's followed up with a pretty, you could be 5-5 at that bye week. The bye week is in week 10, so you'll be 5-4 or 4-5, and then really set yourself up for a nice run at the end of the season, the way this thing kind of maps out. Let me get your thoughts on something that I don't know that I've seen in all my time doing this, maybe in your time doing this either. 4 straight division games to close out the year.
Yeah, 88 was the last time. I think I had that in the story. So it's been a really long time, over 30 years. And obviously the NFL went to that more of a sort of heavy division schedule about, I would say, 5, maybe 10 years ago, where they do that for every team because they want to discourage any tanking, and their thought process is if you're playing a division rival, you're going to want to win that game, whether you're in the mix or you're not. And I think for the most part, it's worked out pretty well for the league, but you rarely get 4 in a row to end the season, and that's where it's going to come down to, let's be honest.
Now, do you like the 4? I mean, because of the fact that you think that the Giants are going to be weak and the Redskins are going to be weak, that you're going to get the Giants, you play twice in that 4-game stretch, And
I think that's going to be helpful if you need those wins. I mean, you could argue by week 17 they might not even need that win, and you might see a bunch of backups. But and that stuff you can't project when you're playing that.
No, I think you have them at 11-3 by now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it should come down to the Cowboys and Eagles.
Well, and I will say this, John, too, real quick. The road games they have, when you have to travel on the road in the NFL, it's tougher. At Miami, that team, we all anticipate it's not going to be very good.
I mean, they might be tanking.
Right. So
this is an easy schedule on paper.
One of your road games is at Miami. Another one of your road games is at Buffalo, another team that's, not a playoff team. So 2 of your 8 road games, 4 of which are not in the division, you've got Miami and Buffalo on that slate. So, look, the NFC East maps out well because they have the AFC East. 3 of those teams typically don't make the playoffs. Now, the Jets should be better this year.
Yeah, I agree. And that's one of those things. That's where the Jets are adding talent. And if Sam Darnold, that's a big if he turns the corner, that could be one team you think is bad that isn't bad when it gets to that particular day and might end up being tougher than, say, Green Bay. I just mentioned who you might think is tough on paper, but if you really think about it, it's been Aaron Rodgers and not much else for a couple of years there now. So people kind of lean on that and say, well, Rodgers is going to be tough. Jets are a better football team from 1 through 53 on paper. And if that second-year quarterback kind of takes off, that's a game that probably is tougher than you think it's going to be.
Yep, and there's some other, so Washington at Atlanta, Detroit with second-year coach there. They're coming here with Matthew Stafford. Then we talked about Green Bay, the Jets. What about at Minnesota? They came here last year. You played them in the playoffs. Now you got to go out there. Is Minnesota a team that you think is going to be bouncing back or on the decline?
They're a team that's tough to figure out. I think it's to be determined. I mean, they're really good. They're really deep. They're really talented everywhere but offensive line. And that will derail your season if you can't block for the quarterback. And that's what happened to them last year. And they really haven't addressed it. So unless they can fix some holes in the draft and get those guys up and running rather quickly, they're going to have a bottom 5 offensive line again. And then you project against the Eagles, whose strength is generally their defensive line. It's a good matchup on paper for Philadelphia, but then, as you mentioned, the Vikings came here and beat them last year, and that was a similar type scenario.
Yeah.
It's a very difficult place to play. I would say, again, and this is early, to me, because we just went down all the positives of the Eagles' schedule, and I joked about 16-0. You're not going 16-0, so you got to figure out logical losses. That would probably be in the column of logical losses because it's just a very difficult place to play. And Kirk Cousins, for all his criticism people give to him, they haven't watched him when he's played the Eagles. He generally plays very well against the Eagles.
Well, and it's also the start of 3 straight road games for Philly. So if you're looking for the most difficult start part of the schedule, you got 3 road games or Chicago, New England, Seattle. Yes, they're all at home, but all 3 of those teams made the playoffs last year. So it's either the 3 straight road games against one playoff team or 3 straight home games against 3 teams that made the playoffs last year.
Yeah, I mean, hey, look, we all kind of want to put the eulogy on the Patriots, it seems like every year, and it never happens, and people are doing it again. They've lost some significant skill position talent, obviously starting with Rob Gronkowski. The Bears, though, I think, we always talk about worst to first. They were worst to first last year, and I think it's always difficult for those types of teams because all of a sudden you don't have the 4th place schedule, you got the 1st place schedule. So I don't think they're going to be as good as people might think. And then the Seahawks are always kind of what the Seahawks are. The positive part, I think, is the fact that, as you mentioned, all those games are at home. So while it does project to be 3 of the more difficult teams on the schedule, at least it's in South Philadelphia.
Yeah, we're talking with John McMullen. Of course, the full Eagles schedule is out, and you can check it out at 97.3ESPN.com. John has his thoughts on the schedule. Now, one of the other areas that I think is kind of – they got that bye week in week number 10, and you've been around the players in the league long enough. You get that later bye. Is that a plus or a minus?
Always a plus. They like it as late as possible. And that's you're going to be banged up at that point. There's no way. That's what this league is. And if you get a bye week early, it's not as helpful. So as late as it is, the players like that more. And it makes a lot of sense because you kind of need to recharge your batteries. So that's also, I mean, there's not a lot of check marks in the negative column when you look at the schedule. There really isn't. And so I understand why people are excited. I think they should be excited because everything is laid out in front for them.
Yeah, and not only that, but now the one thing we hinted at it, we touched on it. You got Matt Ryan, Matt Stafford, you've got Aaron Rodgers, Sam Darnold, Kirk Cousins, Dak Prescott. You've got Trubisky in there with Josh Allen, 2 young guys. You got Brady, you got Russell Wilson, and then, of course, Eli Manning at the end there. But Russell Wilson and Tom Brady back-to-back. So there are some star-powered quarterbacks that you're going to be facing this year, but you're also going to be facing Allen, as we mentioned, Trubisky, as we mentioned, Miami, whoever the heck their signal caller will be. You get a double dose of Case Keenum, and, of course, your double dose of Eli Manning. So a interesting dynamic of the quarterbacks that you'll face, but some really good ones with Brady and Russell Wilson, and as we mentioned, Aaron Rodgers, Matt Ryan, Matt Stafford.
Yeah, and that's a dynamic that can always change and probably will change, especially when you talk about in division, not only from injury standpoint, but if the Giants end up taking a quarterback.
And that'll be interesting, John, because the Giants you don't play till late in the year. You might not see Eli Manning twice.
Guy.
Yeah,
you're going to be seeing the young guy if they take a young guy. Dave Gettleman spoke today. If you believe what he says, and I don't, I think it's flying season in the NFL, but you're going to be seeing Eli Manning to 2023. But ultimately, if they do take a young quarterback, even if it's at 17, ultimately by that late in the season, I would expect that young quarterback to be in the mix, which is not necessarily a bad thing, just showing you how things can change. Same thing with Washington. They might take a quarterback. They might trade for Josh Rosen. They might draft a quarterback. So while it projects to be Case Keenum, hey, who knows? Colt McCoy, if they don't do that, might even beat him out. So things like that can always change. And then as you talked about, I kind of addressed it a little bit before with those younger quarterbacks, the Darnolds, Trubisky's, Josh Allen. There's the chance, the opportunity that those guys take a big step forward, and you might not think they're that difficult right now, and all of a sudden game week arrives and you're starting to think differently.
Yep. By the way, to go back to the conversation we were having about the 4 straight division games, there have been only 2 other teams in the last 20 years who finished the year with 4 straight division games, the 17 Packers and the 2000 Packers. So that is an anomaly that doesn't come up all that much. Plus you get, by the way, a Super Bowl rematch between the Eagles and the Patriots that we just discussed. I did see something, when these schedule makers, they have a tough job. They got to do some tough things. Something with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers where they don't play at home from November, like the end of November, all the way into November, the end of September, I should say, all the way into November. They got to go out west twice. They got a London game. I mean, that is a long stretch of games where they don't play in Tampa. Same thing with Oakland, where they're not at home for over a month and a half. I mean, sometimes these schedule makers, I feel like they just decide, all right, I'm out. I've done this thing so many times. I've put so many different formulas together. This is what you get.
Well, people are not happy every year, and there are certain issues, and that's why I said, to me, that's the most positive thing about the Eagles' schedule is you look at all the boxes, and generally you check some. Well, this is good. This is bad.
I think Harry. I heard Harry this morning talking about the Eagles are playing 3 teams or 2 teams coming off a bye or something like that.
Yeah, maybe that could be the one thing you could put in a bad category. But boy, you got to dig deep to find much that you don't like. Part of it is, I mean, the international games are what they are. If you're up, you're going to have some issues as far as travel, and if you're the home team, as Jacksonville is always designated, then you lose a home game. That's one of the reasons why teams like Philadelphia, Jeffrey Lurie said he'll go again. He loves it, but he's not giving up a home game. So that's generally for teams.
Now, does he have control over that?
Well, nobody has full control. If the NFL wants to do it, and if it's your turn, but the league is a business at the end, and they generally take teams that struggle maybe to sell tickets, and that's never going to be Philadelphia, at least in this era. So the Eagles haven't had to worry about that.
Or in any era.
Well, that's a little bit, to be honest, of revisionist history. You go to times at the Vet, and the Eagles did not sell out every game. So it has changed a lot, and this era, it's not, obviously it's not an issue. and it doesn't seem like it's going to be an issue anytime in the near or even far future. So the Eagles and other high-profile teams, and Dallas is one of them as well, they generally don't have to worry about that, and for good reason. I mean, one of the things the Eagles tried to get the Thanksgiving game out of Dallas, because that's a big advantage for the Cowboys. It's a big advantage for the Lions. On a short week, you always have somebody coming to you. But that's tradition, and the NFL is not going to change that.
By the way, strength of schedule, the Eagles are 26th, 4.77 opponent win percentage from 1 year ago to this year. So it makes them have one of the easier schedules in the league according to last year's schedule. Now, Jeff Mosher asked me a question. I'll ask you. Which non-playoff team that is on this year's schedule? Now, only 4 teams the Eagles face made the playoffs last year. So which non-playoff team is on the schedule that you think will be a playoff team this year?
I think I've talked about it a lot. I think the Jets have an opportunity. A lot of it hinges on how far Sam Darnold comes and improves. I think if he does, you think about it, obviously New England's going to win that division, but it's a really bad division. And if they improve, you got the Dolphins we just talked about are essentially as close to tanking as you can be in the NFL. The Bills are still a work in progress with a very young quarterback. I don't think they've done as good a job as the Jets, who are in the same position, building up around that particular quarterback, at least to this stage. So the rest of that division outside the Patriots is very weak, and that gives them an opportunity to get a wild card. So I think that's a team people should be keeping their eye on.
By the way, right now at 97.3 ESPN.com, we are 1 week away from the draft. John McMullen has pieced together his annual ranking of the top prospects available in this draft with the help of 3 former professional scouts. He has that up right now, and we will go over that list tomorrow right here on Football at 4 on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. We will be less than 1 week away from the NFL Draft when Football at 4 hits the air tomorrow with John McMullen. Any last rights that you would like to mention about this year's schedule, prediction, anything?
It's just that's what if you look at those traditional strength of schedule stories, they're kind of meaningless because it doesn't take into account all those variables and those worst to first and fourth place schedule versus first place schedule. So there's Warren Sharp always does a more involved strength of schedule thing, takes into account other issues like the schedule, like the fourth place schedule, like travel, like bye weeks, and has this sort of algorithm to figure it out. And by that, the Eagles have an even easier schedule. I think he had them at the 3rd easiest schedule. So I'm telling you, it couldn't have gone much better for Philadelphia.
Where's the Super Bowl this year?
I think they're a legitimate contender.
Where's the game? Where is it? In New Orleans?
Miami.
Oh, Miami. So 2 trips to Miami coming.
It could be. And certainly they won't be facing the Dolphins.
I don't know how I didn't know Miami. When we were in Minnesota, when we were in Atlanta this year, we had the coconuts all over the place.
The coconuts, yeah. And that was pretty good, those coconuts.
All right, John McMullen at JF McMullen. And, of course, tomorrow we will go over the draft prospects. You can check that story out right now at 97.3 ESPN.com. All right, pal, we'll talk tomorrow.
All right, thanks, Mike.